What? You didn't know Kevin Williamson was writing a new upcoming horror film? What, he been in quarantine or something? What is up, guys, and welcome to my early, possibly very early review of Sick. I don't have a release date that I could find online, so I don't know if this is in fact going to be a 2022 release or if you're going to see it sometime next year, but this is one of the films that me and Sean Chandler checked out at this year's Fantastic Fest. It is written by Kevin Williamson, that all of you horror nerds are going to know as the guy that wrote Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, quite a few other films in that 90s, 2000s era that is still celebrated to this day, mostly Scream. And that was honestly the only bit of information that we had walking into this that made us go, yeah, we're definitely checking out Sick, right? And essentially what this is a film that is taking that very meta commentary exploration style that Kevin Williamson famously has in most of his scripts and applying it to the COVID pandemic. This film takes place about a month after COVID reached the US and the whole country went into lockdown, and it has kind of a comedic spin, a satirical spin on a lot of the things that were happening early on in the pandemic, the way that the public was reacting to things, some of the things that was just kind of became culture along that time that now luckily we can look back on and hopefully laugh at a little bit with how extreme things were, and it takes that into the realm of a slasher film. The movie is also directed by John Hyams, who directed 2020's Alone, which is a film that I have not seen and honestly have never heard of, but the great Chris Stuckman recommended it to me, so I'll be sure to check it out before long. And he is also, something that Sean told me about, the son of the guy that directed Time Cop. For those of you that remember Time Cop, that's pretty fucking awesome. So starting off with the positives for Sick, to me, I really enjoyed the Kevin Williamson commentary, satire take on the COVID pandemic and some of the early craziness that was going on in the first couple of months of 2020. For some people that have a lot more of a tragic experience with COVID than I have, then you're probably not going to enjoy that humor. So this is your warning. This is a film that is definitely taking a comedic jab at all those things. But for me, I was able to enjoy a lot of it. The movie opens up, the first 10 or 15 minutes, it's showing a guy go to the grocery store, all the toilet paper's gone, you got lines of people trying to get all of these like household items that they need to take home so they're not going to be in public for a while. You got somebody in the back of the line that sneezes and like 17 people are like,
be careful.
And then we're introduced to the two protagonists of this film that are going off to this isolated cabin to quarantine, and a slasher killer shows up at this cabin and gives you the rest of your film. And towards the third act of the film, it really starts to dive in heavy into that Kevin Williamson style whenever all the answers are revealed and the Scooby-Doo masks come off and we get the motivations of the killer. All of that stuff really wraps back into COVID a lot heavier than the previous act and even some of the first act as well. So I'm somebody that was the most interesting part of the film to me. That was something that's going to make this stand out. I haven't watched very many of them, but thus far, all of the movies that have decided to kind of quote-unquote cash in on the storyline of the COVID pandemic, I have not enjoyed. For a lot of people, and to a degree myself as well, there hasn't been enough time and distance from COVID, since it's still somewhat going on still, that really is something that I can laugh at and enjoy. But this film, of all the ones that I have seen, has done the best job at trying to make that an enjoyable exploration. I also thought that all the performances across the board, from the protagonist to the antagonist, were actually really good. And you know, that's something that you have to say when it's a slasher film, because more often than not, unfortunately, I think that we expect that the acting caliber is going to be the first thing to take a nosedive, if anything else, and it's really good here. All the protagonists are characters that are believable within these situations. There's a bit of sharp wit humor coming through. The main girl, I recognized her from Blockers, I believe, and she's somebody that I'm going to have my eye on now because she was very good here. Gideon Adlon was her name. Had to Google it really quick, but she was very good in this. And even at the third act, when you start to get the motivations, the explaining, the exposition dumps from the villains, I think the performances for them were really good as well. All of the action in the second act regarding like the chase sequences and some of the slashing action sequences and some of the more hand-to-hand combat and the fighting between the protagonists and the killers was very well directed. That's the main reason why I'm actually even more interested in checking out his previous work with Alone, because it's a very well directed film. The star of the show is obviously the script here. Kevin Williamson's probably the bigger name, but John Hyams is somebody that does a very good job with all of the elements of the film that is not resting on the Kevin Williamson wit. And I also think that a lot of the gore and a lot of the carnage that you get in the film, despite there not being much of it, is really well done as well. Moving on to the negatives, there was one sequence in this film regarding like a raft to where one of the protagonists is trying to get away from a killer, and so she's like standing up rowing across this lake, and it turns into a bit of a fight scene on the lake. I might need to watch the movie again, but it didn't make a lot of logical sense to me what was going on with somebody being underwater, somebody being above water. Can't get into very many specifics, but that sequence just didn't work for me. The body count is extremely low for a slasher film, being that it is a quarantine movie. Obviously, the point is that not a whole lot of people are going to be quarantined with each other. There's 3 characters that you're essentially following for most of the runtime, and the amount of characters that make it out by the end is not typical what you will see for a slasher. So if you're somebody that comes for a slasher film for the carnage, for the high body count, this is not your movie. But most of all, the thing that unfortunately disappointed me the most with Sick is that for as effective as that COVID commentary and some of that meta exploration of all of that was for me, for what you get in the first act and the third act, there's not nearly enough of it. The entire middle 45 minutes, maybe hour of this film could have been anywhere. It could have been set anywhere in any timeline. There's no quarantine or COVID flavor to it whatsoever. And so it's kind of just bookended by the Kevin Williamson stuff that drew me into the film in the first place. And there just felt like so many more opportunities throughout the movie to inject more of that stuff. Now, obviously, for some of you, you appreciate that there's less of it. You know, the one person that I talked to in the lobby, aside from Sean, said that they didn't necessarily love all the COVID humor, so it's going to be something that's different for everybody. But for me, as somebody that was able to enjoy and kind of laugh at a lot of the things they were poking fun at, I wanted a lot more of it, because that whole segment in the middle of the film where it was gone, despite being very well directed and very well executed, was just a very vanilla, dare I say generic slasher film, and there was so many opportunities to keep that very unique flavor that Sick was bringing throughout the entire runtime, not just the beginning and the end. So overall, guys, I enjoyed this enough, but especially in a year like this year where horror has just been outstanding, like unusually outstanding, this is not a film that I'm going to remember in 2022. There's a lot of missed opportunities here, and it is inherently one of those films that is going to be very divisive because of the subject matter that it is exploring throughout the film. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Please click over here if you enjoyed this to check out the rest of my 2022 new release reviews, and I'm also going to put my Scream playlist up here. And please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss my ranking of all 14 movies I saw at Fantastic Fest that should be dropped tomorrow. So thank you for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.